Hey everybody. Okay, so it has been about 3.5 hours since I fed my starter this morning, and I'm a little bit behind. I underestimated how much flour I had on hand. So if I'm going to try to do 6 loaves today, I had to run to the grocery store and get some more flour. So the flour that I keep on hand for bread making, this is that King Arthur organic bread flour, and it has the higher protein count for the white flour. Then I ordered this directly from King Arthur. If I could put a shout out to Kroger's, if you could carry a bigger variety of flours, that would be awesome. Pretty much you have all-purpose wheat and bread flour choices right now, besides all the other specialty flours. But for baking, we'd love to have some rye flour. That's a King Arthur. This is a pumpernickel that I ordered, and a spelt. And the fun thing about working with baker's percentages is you can play around. Sorry, that was a stool. You can play around with the mixes and kind of get to a flavor that you like. The only challenge that I have found is when I'm doing multiple loaves like this, I play around with the mixes, but then I give the loaves away. So I never get to really see what they tasted like. So that's okay, that's part of the fun. So again, everything is done by weight. So I've got my scale here, and I'm gonna go ahead and tare that. So I mentioned in an earlier video that the particular bread recipe that I use is probably the most basic one. It's just percentages based on your amount of flour. So I do a dough mix that will make 2 loaves of bread. It's based on 1,000 grams of flour. And then I start out with 75% water, which based on 1,000 grams of flour is 750 grams of water. I do 20 grams of starter, which is working over there. It's a little bit better than doubled, which is, like I said, I'm a little behind in getting this autolyse started, because I don't think I'm gonna get a full 2 hours. I'll be lucky if I get an hour, but that's okay, because the autolyse, you can still make great bread without the autolyse. But I do a 75% water ratio in the beginning, because as I'm doing my mixing and my stretch and folds, I am constantly wetting my hand, and so I'm adding water each time. I don't know that I get up to a full 80%, but that's about where I like to be. That's where I feel most comfortable handling the dough, and I tend to like the rise and the results the best. So I start at 75, but I do creep up a little bit because of that. So an example of a ratio of flour, so I just tared my scale again. It's going to be mostly bread flour. So I might start out, depending on what kind of a combination. Your flours, like your rye, sometimes they can be a little bit more coarsely ground. This one's actually pretty finely ground, so I don't think I have to worry about it. But some rye I've had in the past was pretty coarsely ground. And what happens with those coarser grains is, as you're doing your stretch and folds and you're trying to build the gluten strands, so what happens is the whole purpose of your bulk rise and your stretch and folds is to get those gluten strands to form, because they form kind of like a network. And when that network of strands captures the CO2 or the gas, I think it's CO2, but the gas, that's what causes your bed to rise and get fluffy. So if the strands aren't able to form, it won't rise. And with your coarser grains, when you're doing your stretch and folds, they're actually cutting and breaking those strands. So, but like I said, this rye that I have from King Arthur seems to be pretty finely ground, so I don't think I'm going to have that same issue. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to go ahead and do 800 of this bread flour for this first one. So it's going to be mostly bread flour. I'm at 796. There we go, 800 on the money. All right, I have not done one with this pumpernickel flour yet, so I'm really anxious to try it. And I think I want it to be mostly the pumpernickel so I can really see what it does, but I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you can see that really well, but there's some really pretty flour in there. And I'm gonna do 150 grams of the pumpernickel. Okay, I'm gonna do 153 grams. And then this is spelt. From what I understand, spelt just adds a really nice flavor to the dough. You don't need a lot of it. I haven't worked with spelt very much. This is kind of new for me. So I'm just doing about 50 grams. $9.98. 1,000 on the money. All right. So I've got my bunch of flour, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my 750 grams of water, and I just pour that right on top. I didn't tear my scale, so of course I'm looking for 1,750 grams. And I can get a little excited and pour too quickly. You just really want to keep an eye on that scale. 1,700, 1,744, 1,750. And this again is just that regular, just Texas spring water. So far everything I've added, I haven't added any preservatives, I haven't added any dyes, any chemicals. It's just flour and water. So right before I started recording, I washed my hands really well. I actually take off my wedding ring because this is where you get to really get in there and act like a kid again. I always try to keep one hand clean in case I need to reach for something or do something, but the other hand, now there's different things. Some people will use a spatula, some people will use, I have this really cool Danish dough hook that I like. It's not a Danish, it's not a hook, it's a Danish dough spoon kind of thing. Ultimately though, I kind of just like to use my hand. I like to really get in there and really mix it up. I will show you. These are crazy cheap. It's a little plastic dough scraper thing, and the thing about them is it's flexible. I think I got a pack of 3 from Amazon for dirt cheap. I keep this ready because once I'm mixing, before I let it sit, I want to scrape down the sides, because anything that's left on the sides of the bowls is going to kind of dry and get crusty, and you don't want that getting mixed back into your dough. It happens, but if you can just give it a quick scrape, it'll just minimize that. So I'm going in. I hope you can see. If I had a fancy production studio, this is where my camera would be zoomed right over top on my hand. You could see how this mixing happens, but I'm just squeezing, basically squeezing the water into the flour, or vice versa. And at first, this is what they call really shaggy. So it seems like there's not enough water, and it seems like you're going to be wanted to be tempted to add more. But the good thing is when you're working with baker's percentages, and you've measured it on the scale, you know you have the right amount in there. And it is true that different flours will require different hydration levels. That's what that water percentage is called in baking speak, is hydration. This is a 75% hydration dough, and it seems really dry and shaggy right now, but it will start to absorb some of that liquid as I mix. And I started to say different flours will require different amounts of water, and that's just a matter of playing around with your flour, your dough, how you like it. And that's what I love about sourdough. I was pawning loaves off on my friends. One, just because it's really fun to be able to bake something yummy and delicious to give to friends. But it's all about practicing. It's just, you just keep doing it. And so you can see this is starting to get a lot more mixed up. It's super sticky, but I'm going to keep mixing it because I still have all that dry flour on the bottom of my bowl. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the edge of my finger to kind of scrape and get under that and really try and push that down. And this is where a tool like a spatula or the Danish dough spoon or whatever it's called is helpful, because it'll kind of scrape the bowl for you. But again, I'd just rather use my hand. As I'm squeezing and mixing, I'm still feeling little lumps in there. You can see some of that dry flour starting to disappear. I'm just giving the side of the bowl a little scrape. So it's kind of a scrape, pull. Oh, that worked out really well. It actually flipped the dough, which I couldn't have done if I was trying to. So I'm still just working against some of that shagginess. This is for the autolyse. And I will tell you that using that pumpernickel flour for the first time, this really absorbed a lot of that liquid. It's getting there, but it is still really sticky. So I'll keep working this. Maybe, and this is what I love about it, is you learn every single time you do it, you get more comfortable. But you know, if I use pumpernickel again, I may go ahead and just start out at an 80% hydration. We'll see. So Bubba keeps popping in on my videos here and kind of whining. He's super vocal and he talks a lot. I think he's wondering who I'm talking to. All right. So here's what I'm looking for. It's still pretty sticky. I'm gonna have to use, my scraper and a paper towel to get this off my hand. But what you'll notice if you look at the bowl is as I'm mixing, it's kind of pulling away from the bowl a little bit, and that's exactly what you want to see. So what I just want to make sure is that I don't have any dry flour anywhere. I don't have any major lumps. That's part of what this autolyse process is for as well, is it's going to kind of soak in, hydrate all of that flour, and start that gluten development. And I can feel with my hands as I'm mixing this, kind of the graininess of that pumpernickel. So it'll be interesting to see how it reacts throughout this process. Okay, so that is about as mixed as you need it for your autolyse. And I forgot to pull this out, but I bought on Amazon a package. I think it was like 100 disposable plastic shower caps, and I don't know, it was like $12 or something. I love to use those because it just fits perfectly over the bowl. It keeps it nice and taut, but I'm not reusing a whole bunch of cling wrap or saran wrap, because the shower cap, I could just keep reusing it. So I'll use the same shower cap for the entire process of this dough. So it cuts down on a lot of waste, even though it's still plastic. Some people will use like a damp tea towel, and that's probably the better choice as far as sustainability and not putting plastic in the trash. Unfortunately for me, I like to be able to see what the dough is doing, and sometimes if the towel is over it, it can stick to it and stuff like that. So it's a better choice. If you can use a damp towel, do it. If not, a plastic shower cap works great, and you can keep reusing it. So I'm gonna go scrape my hand off. I'm gonna do exactly the same thing for the next 2 batches. So remember, each dough is 2 loaves. I'm just gonna play around with the ratio a little bit, and we're gonna let this autolyse, we're gonna just let it sit and absorb all that moisture until our starters are ready to go, which they're probably have grown by about 120%, so they're a little over double. I'm thinking maybe another hour, hour and a half, and we'll jump back on, and I'll show you how to introduce your starter and your salt before you start that next phase, which is the bulk rise. See you later.